Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazell, and this is Dev Dive, a show where me and sometimes a guest interviewer get a chance to talk to interesting game developers about their games. And today we have Dan DiIorio, the creator of Luck Be a Landlord, a slot machine roguelike deck building game. We're going to talk all about the inspirations and the creation behind this game that is really unique and very interesting. And I played a bunch of it, and Charlie has as well. And we're going to be exploring this with Dan and getting you the inside scoop about this game. But Dan, thank you very much for sort of on a whim replying to our emails and getting this set up pretty quick. And now we're here to talk about it.
Of course, thank you for having me.
And Charlie, thank you for joining me. You were the one who sort of put me onto this game and told me about it. And you're like, hey, you should reach out to this guy for an interview. And I'm like, okay, yeah, well, why don't you help me? So welcome to the show, first ever guest host, Charlie Wacholz, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, thank you. And Dan, I just want to offer my congratulations first and foremost on the launch on some other platforms. I know that's Luck Be a Landlord has been out on PC for quite some time, and like I've seen you advertise on MinMax and stuff, and so it's pretty cool to have seen you hit a couple other platforms and maybe see some more success and some more players coming into the game. I mean, I was just on the Android store the other day, and it was like #2 on the paid charts for gaming, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. This was like, I think it was on launch day, so numbers might have been a little skewed, but either way, I think that's still really awesome that you're able to find this level of success with such a cool game.
Yeah, thank you. The console port was a long time coming, so glad to finally have that out there.
Yeah, but let's start where everything began for Luck Be a Landlord. And what that really means is what your history is with game development, even before you made Luck Be a Landlord. How long have you been making games? What kinds of games have you made? Just start off with that story and sort of introduce yourself.
So for a long time, I thought I wanted to make movies, and I did that for a long time. I did a YouTube show called LOL Math, where I talked about League of Legends a lot, did a lot of like kind of strategy stuff in there. And I think that's a whole different story, but I think doing all the math in that probably helped me balance my game better. I got burnt out of that after high school, kind of got pulled towards game development again because I'd always wanted to make games, never really knew how. I'm entirely self-taught in that I basically just learned from YouTube tutorials for a long time. Finally got a game out there in 2013. It was a Flash game called Gaming Quote Master, which was, I was inspired by a game called Geek Mind. It was a Flash game where they showed you a screenshot and you had to guess the title of the game. You just had to type it in. So I made a version of that, but instead it was a quote from a game. And I just made some Flash games, web games for a little while. None of them really took off. Fast forward to, it would be 2020. I was working in a comic book store, which I enjoyed, but the pandemic was going on, making not enough to really stay afloat, barely working any hours. I'm like, all right, I'm going to just try this. I'm privileged enough to have a little bit of a safety net in that I could move back in with my parents. I don't want to, but I can take the risk, obviously. Made Luck Be a Landlord it entered early access in January of 2021. I started development around, say, August of 2020.
Okay, so quick turnaround.
Somewhere around there, yeah. And it was in early access for about 2 years. And it probably would have been less time if we hadn't had the success of the game, because it let us move into a better place. Moving meant a lot of other work had to be done, so I had to put the game on the back burner for a bit. But it finally released out of early access in January of 2023. So it's been basically almost 5 years since I started working on the thing.
Sure, yeah, and with the success, it's been something that you've been focusing on for 5 years. So and now with these console ports released, I mean, this has been an ongoing journey for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something that I'm curious about then, if you said you wanted to be a filmmaker, or you had kind of dreams of being a filmmaker for a while, were there any films that went on to inspire Luck Be a Landlord? Because in my mind, it's not obviously a very cinematic game, but I think it is still a very textually rich game, and there is a lot being said in there. So I'm curious if there are any movies that kind of led, or literature too, that kind of encouraged the ideas of Luck Be a Landlord.
Not consciously any movies or literature. It's definitely based on my own life experiences and games I've played. When I was, I don't remember how old, but like I was playing these like demo disc sort of things that were on my dad's old laptop. And a few of them were like little slot machine games. And I had no idea how to play them. I didn't even understand what was going on. But I knew how to like make add a ton of play money to it and just make the number go up and just watch it happen a lot and watch all the, just, oh, the numbers are going, this is great. It would have been like 20 or I don't remember how old I was. Old enough to gamble at electronic slot machines. I went to a casino with my dad. I hated it. I had $20 and I bet 5 on a slot machine and it went up to 60. And I'm like, it is statistically best for me to stop playing now. And so I said, okay, I'm either going to go until I have $0 from my 20 I've put in so that I reinforce the idea that this is terrible, or that I'm a millionaire. And I obviously I got to $0. I literally had nightmares about casinos for a while. This is just terrible. Like, there's so much you could do with this, like, based on all the, the flashing lights and the fun stuff you can do with it. In the old Pokemon games, they had the gambling, or it was called the Game Corner.
So you get Porygon, baby.
Exactly. Yeah, I played a lot of Pokemon Sapphire slots, and that was like the last one or maybe it was the second to last one where there was the Game Corner. And in the remake, they didn't have it anymore.
Yeah.
To try and get the SRB rating down, or whatever the rating would be. It's such a disappointment to me. And like, that's basically the main reason why I made Luck Be a Landlord. I knew I wanted to make a slot machine game that was fun and wasn't insidious. The rent thing came after, and the roguelike deck builderness of it also came after.
Sure. We've got 3 different avenues of inspiration and creativity in Luck Be a Landlord that I think we can explore at different points. But I think I do kind of want to start with the slot machine thing, because I find it really fascinating that something that you actively disliked and even had nightmares about became something that you were then interested enough in finding the joy that people can get out of it, and finding a way to make it something that did appeal to you, that wasn't predatory. When it comes to designing something slot machine based, what was the research that you did to like choose how slot machines work? Or like, did you end up going back to casinos to look at different slot machines for inspiration? What was that experience like, leading into something that you didn't like?
I remember I watched a few Twitch gambling streams, just a few. And I saw, like, when their money they got from a spin went up, it would, like, do, like, boom, boom, but, like, it would have the incrementing numbers, things would bounce, and it would eventually tally up. And I looked at that, I'm like, okay, that's fun. If it's not actual money, that's okay. It's not insidious. And then I kind of just stopped. I didn't want to watch any more of it. I know the creator of Balatro, Local Funk, did something similar, actually, when he was looking at my game for the inspiration of Balatro, where he looked at Luck Be a Landlord and said, okay, this is very interesting. That's enough. I've got enough to go here. Let me use my own design sensibilities and just kind of see where it goes. And like, there's all sorts of like things I've grabbed from other games, like the chimes of like the notes increasing when you get each different value. It goes up a chord each time. That's completely taken from Fez, where each time you get a different cube,
that's a good point.
You just get the note goes higher.
Yeah.
I don't know any music. It's note, chord, I don't know. It's all just based on other games I've played and things I've experienced. Yeah.
Sure.
Something that Tucker and I noticed in preparation for this interview, and something that we've kind of touched on, is experience and things that you've experienced beyond media that went on to inspire Luck Be a Landlord. And I think one of the quotes that we saw from you was specifically that it was the product of a radicalization in some kind of housing related situation. And so I guess I'm curious about that too, because it sounds like whether it's the slot machines in the casino or frustration with the housing market, there is a lot of a surprising amount of like struggle or pain or unpleasant feeling that kind of went into something that's I feel very silly and very comical in a lot of ways.
I think that comes from an interview I did a while ago. Actually, I think I know exactly when it was. It was around, that's how I measure time, the third big patch for Luck Be a Landlord, which would have been around March of 2021, I think, which I had to delay because I couldn't get my ADHD medication. And so someone wrote about that. And the quote from that, I think, described me as a recently radicalized leftist, which is accurate, but also like, I don't want to make it think like I suddenly make people think I was just like, wait a minute, like it was a sudden thing. It was definitely very gradual. I wish I could say it was like me being very in tune with like political climates and stuff that was going on. The first prototype of the game was just make the number go up as much as you can and eventually reach, I think it was like 50,000 or something, and then you win. And however many spins you did that in, was your score. And it was fine, but it just didn't really have any like checkpoints, I guess. And so eventually I said, well, what if there was different thresholds you had to meet over the course of that gauntlet or whatever you want to call it? And I just said, well, okay, you're getting coins. Why are you losing coins? What if there, you had to pay your rent? And it was just kind of something I grabbed, but it just kind of resonated with me, I guess, of like, this makes sense. And it also very easily creates an antagonist for the landlord.
Yeah.
Because no one likes them, and you shouldn't. It's kind of a product of a lot of my development ideas where, like, if you notice some of the items in Luck Be a Landlord, like the dishwasher or the instant ramen, I mean, they are things that are, like, common in apartments, which makes sense, but it also kind of just, I was, like, looking at my desk, like, what could be a design thing? I have to pay, I'm looking at a rent check, maybe. I don't really remember, but it's like, I have to pay this. Well, that could work, I kind of just look in my immediate vicinity for game ideas sometimes.
Yeah. So we talked about the slot machines. We talked about the inspiration of landlords and rents and the stuff that went into that. And of course, we can get into more of that later if you'd like. But then there's also the roguelike element of it. And you said that came even later in development. And I'm curious, number one, which roguelike games you love that you might have taken inspiration from to create this game on a design level. But then what inspired it making slot machine into a roguelike? Like, what was that process like of balancing those two inspirations into one cohesive whole?
So I was definitely inspired by Slay the Spire. That was and is probably the most important roguelike deck builder. I genuinely think the concept of you have these resources, something happens, pick one of 3 resources to add to your inventory or whatever you want to call it. It's golden. It's so important. It's just like Vampire Survivors does the same thing, even though it's not really a roguelike deck builder. Lots of games have like, here's an upgrade, pick one of 3. I've tried to make games that were similar to roguelike deck builders and just couldn't do it because I didn't have the last piece of like, just add one of 3 things when you're done up with a challenge of some kind. And I applied it to Luck Be a Landlord and it just worked.
Yeah, I'm a massive fan. I have probably a combined total of like 500 hours in Slay the Spire. Like I do the daily climb every day. I'm grinding for Ascension 20 right now. I'm in the muck. And so I guess something that I'm curious about is Slay the Spire has a very interesting way of doling out power spikes where you kind of reliably know when you're getting these big power spikes, right? You know when you're getting the mummified hand, you know when you're getting the urn, whatever. Luck Be a Landlord kind of follows a similar rhythm to that. What was something that you learned in terms of balancing something that is much more macro in terms of how it affects your ability to make money in Luck Be a Landlord?
Can you elaborate what you mean by macro?
These kinds of potentially game-changing things that have a bigger impact on the overall playing field compared to an individual node that you place on the slot machine. It's so fascinating to me personally because I play so many roguelikes and I still have trouble wrapping my mind around how these things in particular are balanced because they are, across most roguelikes, somehow universal but also distinctly linked to each individual game's progression. So I'm always interested in how those are balanced out and how those kind of are ideated, I guess.
In terms of numbers, I definitely found a bunch of like inherent rules. Like for a while, some of the numbers just didn't make any sense. I think Ninja used to start with 4 coins and just decrease by 1, which was way too powerful for an uncommon symbol. One thing I've definitely learned and that I'm applying to Maze Mice, my next game, is I want to try to keep everything a little bit underpowered. So if I need to make it more powerful later, it's less painful. If I misjudge it and it's just the right amount and like it's powerful enough, but I thought it was underpowered, that's fine. If I misjudge it and it's way too powerful, I'm probably doing something really wrong because I thought it was underpowered. Or if I judge just right and it's underpowered, it's very easy to then say, we'll just increase it a little bit later. Things like that are definitely where I nowadays will err on the side of, if I think it should be like a 3 to a 5 of damage, I'm going to make it a 3. And then later I can make it a 4 or 5 if I need to. There's definitely a lot of, in Luck Be a Landlord, tweaking, where I did this for the first major update after the game's release, where I tried to just increase any numbers I could that would make it so that the average win rate increased without making the game unfun. Like, for example, I think it was Watering Can. It makes the seed symbol instantly grow, but also give a little bit of a bonus when it does grow. I think it gave a bonus of 5 or 10, and I increased it to 12, where it's like not a crazy amount, but if it makes a difference in one run over the course of how many people are playing the game, that's just one more run that someone won just by the skin of their teeth. Things like that, I try to add a lot of those, where it's like, if it's 2 extra coins, either that makes the difference, barely, or doesn't make the difference, and if it's not there, it doesn't feel good if you're like 6 coins short. If you're 5 coins ahead, you're like, oh, okay, I just barely made it. That feels really good. That creates a moment, things like that.
I like that it's such a granular progression of balancing and tweaking and making sure things feel just right, even over the course of every run that everyone's played. You're like thinking about it on that like super high level. And you mentioned earlier that you are big into statistics. You've done this show about math and League of Legends, and I'm curious what your mathematical skills are outside of this that you were then able to apply to Luck Be a Landlord. Is this something you've always been fascinated with? Or you're a big math kid in school, and then able to sort of utilize those skills in game design?
It was definitely something I was always interested in school. I'm pretty good at mental math in that I think it might be like a synesthesia thing where I look at 2 numbers and I just kind of know how they add together. But past Algebra 1, I never really learned anything. Like geometry, I always struggle with triangles or circles when it comes to actually coding things. Definitely a weak spot for me, but you tell me 2 numbers and tell me to add them together, I can do that.
Specifically talking about League of Legends, this is a game that is so combed over and meticulously balanced over and over and over again, and it has been for 15 years now, 16 years.
Geez. Yeah, around there.
When you were doing this YouTube channel and covering League of Legends, presumably from a competitive and statistical standpoint, you already mentioned that was something that really inspired you for Luck Be a Landlord. But what were some of the individual moments, or what were some of the individual things? Because having played a lot of League of Legends very poorly and not understanding it very well, I can think of comparisons in individual matches, like power spikes being the equivalent of final builds of items that you're building up to throughout the game. So what are some things, either in terms of balancing or in terms of actual like gameplay mechanics on a less fine-tuned level, that really inspired you for Luck Be a Landlord?
Well, first of all, if you play League of Legends, I'll tell you, I have not played since like season 4 or so.
Oh, it's been like 7 or 8 years since I last played.
Yeah. It's been a long time for me too.
It's been ever since I played. Never touched that game in my life.
Say that way. One of the things I did in my League of Legends math videos is I broke down some of I don't even know if they have them in the game anymore, the gold generating items, where it would be like you get some health regen, some mana regen, and you also generate, I think, like 2 gold per second or something. I don't remember the numbers at all. One of my first videos was, let's look at this thing. You spend 500 gold on it over the course of, let's see, it was 2 gold per second. That means 250 seconds. You've made your money back, and then it starts to profit. And then the other thing I did was, okay, let's look at the health regen and mana regen. Those are also valuable too. If you're always gaining that health and mana back, let's look at how much the cheapest of those items would be to get those stats and factor that into the cost too. Things like that, I think, were very helpful. For a while on the show, it was kind of just what is interesting in the math of League of Legends, not so much what could be better. And that's where I think in Luck Be a Landlord, I enjoy that a lot more, where I get to be like, okay, well, this does this. Should it do this? Like, there was never a should in the League of Legends show, the whole math show. In Luck Be a Landlord, I get to do things like, there are some symbols like the bear symbol, where it would give 1 coin and it was a common. And I had the payoff of, if you got honey, which was a rare symbol, you destroyed it and you got some extra gold. A lot of extra gold, actually. It's like 40 now. Bumping that up to an uncommon was a very good decision, because you don't want a ton of these. You want just, maybe 1, maybe 2. And since it's uncommon, I can also increase the value to 2, because if it was a common that gave 2 coins, that's just, you'll always take that early on. I gained a lot of knowledge from Magic the Gathering too. One principle Magic has is that rare cards, in their case, in my case rare symbols, don't always have to be like, wow, this is a rare thing. It's great. And that was a lesson that I think was actually kind of wrong for Luck Be a Landlord. Where I'm trying to go with this is in League of Legends, in Magic the Gathering, those are multiplayer games. It's better sometimes to say, okay, well, if you are player A and you're player B, you want them to kind of be on the level playing field in terms of if they have access to all the resources at the beginning. If player A is better, they should be player B. Luck Be a Landlord is a single player game. So if I'm getting a rare symbol, I want it to be like, whoa, this is cool. I get to enjoy this. Not, there's no other player that then has to see the rare symbol and be like, oh, they've got this thing. You're supposed to be the one saying, oh, I've got this thing. You know, that's definitely a thing I've learned as well through balancing. Like, not everything is one-to-one with balancing for multiplayer games, especially for multiplayer to single player. But there's definitely a lot of lessons you can learn.
Certainly. Yeah, and I think that's really a great way to look at it from the outside looking in, again, as a non-roguelike developer, because that really is my favorite thing about roguelikes is for a long time you have these rules hammered into your head, and then all of a sudden maybe 5 runs in, maybe 20 runs in, something clicks and the game hands you a sledgehammer and says, break down those walls and go play in that boundary between what you thought were the boundaries and the new walls. And then, you keep doing that. You keep expanding on that. And I really love that idea of kind of this of Luck Be a Landlord and a lot of other successful, well-made single-player roguelikes being almost antithetical to multiplayer balancing and game design. I guess that brings me to a question of, was there something that you had to cut from the game that you were really bummed to cut that had to be gotten rid of because of a balancing issue?
Nothing I was really like married to, in that like there are some symbols like quartz and plum, which were just extra gems and fruit that didn't do anything. They were just, extra things that could come out of the seed or the ore. And I just cut them out to reduce symbol bloat, basically. And that, if you wanted fruit, that's great. If you wanted, something cool, you didn't want to see quartz a million times when it's functionally the same as, just a rock or shiny pebble, I think is unique now. That was another thing. I tried to add some sort of effect on everything. For a while, I thought it was good to just have, in Magic, we would call them vanilla cards or vanilla creatures, where it has 2 power and 2 toughness. That's all it does. And that's cool, and sometimes there's stuff you can do with that, but in a game where you're seeing them so many times and you want all these exciting effects, it didn't really make sense. One thing I will say that I wish I had cut, that I don't think I can, and I wish I had at some point, is the cultist. I think the cultist symbol is... people love it. I think it's very poorly designed, and there's no good way to design it. But, it's in there, and people enjoy it, so I can't just get rid of it. I can't rework it I could rework it at this point, but it's like, for those who don't know, it's a symbol that it gives 0. It gives 1 more for each other one there is. And if you have at least, I think, 3, you get an additional 1. If you have 3, they give 1 and give 1 for each other one. That on its own is fine, maybe, but it's just not good design for my game at least, where if you take 1, you want to see all of them. They're common symbols because they have to be. And since, as you go through the run, the rarities get more rare, you're less likely to see them. And if you don't get at least 2 or 3 very early, if you get 2, the run is maybe saved. If you get 1, it's terrible because you've taken a 0 value symbol that's just going to take up space. If you get 3, the game's won. So it's way too swingy. And people really gravitate towards it. I've seen tons of videos of the game where people will be like, oh, I'll just get a ton of these. And it's you have no control over that. But that's also my fault in that, how would you know? You haven't played the game yet.
I think that speaks to another strength of, for me, what makes a good roguelike is that kind of gambling element, right? And obviously this is literally a giant slot machine. And I often do describe a run of a roguelike as tugging at a big shiny lever on a slot machine and seeing what happens. But specifically that aspect, because the cultist, once you build it into the eldritch creature and you get all the relics and the I forget what they're called, the hexes, I want to say.
Yeah.
I think it's a really cool example of people wanting to play roguelikes like it's gambling specifically, because again, that's how I feel when I play a roguelike a lot of the time. Is I'm like, oh, this is scratching my itch to want to go play poker.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the interesting parallel between a roguelike and a slot machine, and why I think it's actually a surprisingly natural fit, and why I think, it works so well as a game, why people enjoy it so much, is every time you start, either whether that's pulling a slot machine lever in real life or starting a roguelike round, you're starting from zero, right? You have no idea what's going to happen next. And I think those two ideas, it scratches that same itch in people's brains. And I think that you could put a lot of actual gamblers who use slot machines onto roguelike games, and they would get that same, whether it's Balatro or Peglin or whatever, that same itch scratched without the risk of losing a bunch of your actual money.
I have received emails saying recovering gambling addicts have used my game as sort of a coping mechanism. I don't know if that's legitimate or not, but I choose to believe it. So hopefully
that's amazing.
That'd be really weird for someone to email you and lie about that.
You'd be surprised.
Thinking about the community around this game, this is also a big popular game for YouTube and streaming, and obviously roguelikes definitely lean into that. And I'm curious for you as the creator, watching the community build around certain builds, whether you like them or not, certain streamers finding them. Like I watched some Northern Lion play a bunch of it. He has a ton of videos about it. Do you find yourself watching streamers play it? Do you use their playthroughs or their feedback for balancing? What's that like as the creator watching the game become so popular in a very streaming focused and community focused space?
It's a big question because I love it. I love watching people play my game. I'm so lucky to have people want to play my game and stream it and show it to so many people. It's also at the same time hard to it's always a little cringy seeing people play your game and not quite get it. And that's okay because it's not for everyone. And they can still get some enjoyment out of it usually, which is nice. And the people who like it really like it. One of the hardest things I've had to learn is that when someone gives you feedback, you need to figure out what they're saying, not what they're actually saying. A good example would be, and I don't know if I've gotten the balancing of the suit symbols quite right. They're still a little underpowered, but for a while they were very underpowered, and people would say, suits are terrible, just get rid of them, or suits are terrible, make them get 5 or whatever. The answer that I came up with was not, let's get rid of suits or let's make them broken. It's make them a little more exciting in that if you have at least 3, they give 1 extra, and if they're adjacent to each other, they get a little bit of a bonus there too. They might need a little more support, but basically the thing I try to do is when I see someone not liking something, usually they're going to just say, oh, I don't like this. And they're usually not going to give you feedback or give the right feedback for how to make it better. Watching streamers play or anyone play, or any feedback in the Discord, for example, is, okay, I'm hearing this a lot. What are they really feeling? Not what are they saying, what are they feeling? And I don't collect any analytics for the game. I just kind of do it by feel, which I know some games do, but I can see there's some great GDC talks about, I don't remember his name. Maybe I don't know how to pronounce it. Adrian DeJong. He made Hidden Folks, and he talks about bad data. If you look at all your data, it's so easy to get bogged down to this is 3% more than this. Maybe I should reduce it by 3%. There are so many variables to everything that you can never do that. I try to get a sense of okay, 5 people have said this in the Discord is probably an issue.
And then how do you then take those issues and turn them into design, which is what the people don't understand, because they're just playing a slot machine game. They don't know how the balancing works. They don't know how the number tweaking works. And so that's the challenge of the dev is converting those complaints into something that's actionable.
Yeah, it's definitely not their job either. I'll give you an example for my game that's coming up, Maze Mice. In the game, there are only basically 2 enemy types. And a lot of the main complaint a lot of players gave was there's not a lot of enemy variety. And I kind of thought to myself, okay, well, what if I add an enemy that shoots things? What if I add, and I'm like, wait, let's go to this design principle I was talking about, where what are they really feeling? Maybe they want more types of enemies, but if they even just have palette swaps and some that give more XP, or some that have slightly different behaviors, slight variants, that might be enough. And I added that, and the complaints went away in playtesting. So it's often an issue of also what could be not a huge design effort if you don't need it to be. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes money to do a ton of work on certain things. And it takes a lot less to just realize, okay, just recolor these enemies, they drop more XP. Problem solved. Like in Vampire Survivors, I don't think anyone really looks at the enemies that excitedly, what they do, more so that there's a lot of them, and some of them are easy to kill, some are hard to kill, and some drop more XP. So,
Are you still able to like have fun with Luck Be a Landlord? And if so, what are what build or builds do you usually gravitate towards?
oh, you mean playing it?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I still play it all the time. It kind of is reflected in the design, I think, in that I tend to just kind of go with the flow. In that is usually the best bet in the game itself. Is just you usually will have to pivot, at least on higher difficulties. I always play on floor 20. That's another thing. I play on floor 20 because, like, if the game is balanced well at the highest level, I get the feeling at the easiest level, people will be less skilled at when they start playing anyway, so it's kind of balanced out.
That's where I'm at, by the way. I can't consistently beat a floor 1.
There you go. Maybe I need to tune that a little bit. But the best players in my Discord have almost an 100% win rate on floor 1. I know the highest streak is like over 100 wins in a row. When I play myself, I play on floor 20. And it's weird because like sometimes I'll forget like I made the game. Sometimes I'll have a moment like, this game's pretty good. Well, I made this. You know,
Hey,
that's
feels
awesome.
good. That's great.
Hell yeah.
Good feeling.
One other thing that I'm curious about is a game that looks like this and has the themes like this. I think a lot of people would think that it would have microtransactions. There are a lot of mobile games that are slot machines, a lot of games that are based around slot machine elements that are stuffed full of microtransactions. And obviously, that is not something included in this game. And I'm just curious for you to sort of expound on your philosophy on microtransactions. Obviously, you don't want them in, especially this game. But how do you feel about microtransactions in general, and why do you think they don't belong in Luck Be a Landlord?
There's a lot to talk about here. The whole point of the game is give enjoyment without taking money, which is the opposite of what slot machines do. If there were microtransactions in the game, I don't think it would be possible for the game to exist in the way it does. It wouldn't be as popular. Just to be clear, DLC, I would say, is different from microtransactions in that if I ever did an expansion, which I don't think I'm likely going to do, but if I do, I think that would be fine. Like, just here's a symbol pack, it's X dollars. That I don't really see as a microtransaction compared to like, hey, you just lost. You want to spin again for 99 cents? Which mobile clones of my game do. That's the worst feeling of what's come out of this, is people who have made slot machine games that are slot machines take the fun part and say, well, how do we, milk our customers? I don't want to go into it too much, but there are clones of my game that have raised a lot of money in venture capital, and the person who led that game, you can figure out which one it is if you want, basically joined my Discord and said, hey, is there a wiki for all the symbols and all the information about the game before the game was made, their game was made. And then their game shows up with basically all the symbols and stuff in my game and gradually shifts towards ad revenue, microtransactions, etc. And it's scummy. There's no other word for it. Like, what are you doing? It's, microtransactions, there's a way to do them, I guess. We're so far from it that I don't think there's going to be an ethical way of doing microtransactions for a very long time. DLC, like expansion packs, those have been around for a while. Those are fine, I guess, if done fine.
Let's shift gears a little bit to the narrative of Luck Be a Landlord, which is something that I did not expect the game to have any of when I was going into it. And what the game presents is you're playing through this slot machine game. It's mostly you just looking at the screen. And then as you start finishing up the checkpoints, as you mentioned earlier, you get these little bits of like email narrative from either your landlord asking you to pay your rent or this like underground resistance rebel group that's anti-landlord. And I'm curious when that narrative element entered into development. Like, how late into development did you actually come up with that? And then what was it like, quote unquote, writing a story for a roguelike that is a slot machine game? It's something that I think feels a little anachronistic, but it definitely adds to like the tone and texture of the game.
I don't think I ever felt like I was writing a story per se. Maybe more of like a setting, I guess. I mean, players will definitely draw their own conclusions and make stories in their heads, I suppose. But the emails from your landlord were very early on. The emails from Kami and the Comrade were around patch 3 or so, when I added removal and reroll tokens, and I needed a way to naturally give them to you. I'm like, well, someone could come help you out. Nice mutual aid network. Figure that out. The quote unquote plot. I don't know. I don't think I'm much of a writer. Like, I like words and writing, but and some of my favorite games are visual novels. I just don't think it's really what I'm good at. So I kind of tend to just, minimal words. It's sort of more of like a prompt of like, here's the situation, here's how this works, go.
Both in the writing and in the nodes and or in the symbols and the specific like interactions between some of them, I think Luck Be a Landlord is like a very funny game. Like, it's maybe not in the like laugh out loud, like this game is deliberately trying to be funny with writing and stuff, but I think it has a very comical, goofy bent to it that I really appreciate. Is that sense of humor intentional, or is that just kind of like oh yeah, it just made sense that way and then wound up being funny?
Yes and no. It made sense that way is a design philosophy I try to use, where like, oh, of course the cat drinks some milk. Or like, oh, of course the toddler wants candy. Like, if you in your brain already have made the connection of how the symbols interact, it should do that. Because then there's less barrier to entry of like, there's a lot of symbols in the game. You kind of know how they interact already. What creates some funny stuff is like, for a while, the billionaire did drop a soul when they were destroyed by the spirit, and you have this shrine item. Now they obviously don't, because billionaires don't have souls. Toddler being destroyed by General Zaroff is kind of weird, but it'd be weird if like humans weren't destroyed even though they're babies. It unintentionally, I think, creates comedy, but a lot of it is because you just have so many interactions in the game. Some of them are going to be funny. Like when I used to play Magic the Gathering, anytime you give a creature flying that didn't already have flying, that's just funny. Like, now the bear is flying. That's silly. But now I can fly above you and hit you for 4 points of damage with my bear. That's also fun. Like, stuff like that is great. I don't know.
Getting back to this idea of having kind of this game come from a place of predatory monetization, or experiencing that and then kind of wanting to almost reclaim the fun parts of that without having the negative stuff. Obviously, it's not a good feeling, and obviously it's not a good experience or thing to have happen. Is there anything that you've like learned from that? Because that idea of having really good ideas taken and kind of twisted into something to be used for a cheap and quick profit seems to be a pretty common thing in the land of independent game development. Is there anything that you learned from that? Is there anything that has benefited you or changed how you approach developing games or anything like that?
In terms of developing games, maybe a little bit. Definitely in terms of marketing. When this happens to you, things like this happen to you, you need to be loud about it. Because, people won't know. And if you're loud about it, people will realize, oh, this is messed up, and then they might report on it. And that's good for everyone, especially me, because I definitely will benefit from it a little bit, make a lemonade out of lemons. It sucks that this was copied or bastardized or whatever, but maybe it'll draw attention back to my game in some way. And you also need to be competitive, I guess, and trust that if your design is good, they're copying it for a reason. I've looked at the numbers. I'll just say this. My game has, and this is public information, it has 100,000 downloads on Google Play. And it's a paid game. Their game is free with microtransactions. And it's about the same number of downloads. I doubt they're doing as well as I am financially with the game itself, which is some solace. I mean, that's not really what it's about. I know their game's worse. That I don't need to worry about. And like even the reviews will say things like, hey, I like that this kind of like Luck Be a Landlord, but why do you have, remove ads for $20? That's not fun. The thing I've definitely learned from it is that the people with the money are idiots. They've raised $6 million of venture capital to say, as they put it, develop the luck puzzler genre. Their new genre or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So use those search terms, you'll find it. Where does that come from? Like, someone just looks at it, some billionaire sees it and says, slot machine, video game, startup, boom, go. And they don't think about it anymore. And then they can't execute on it because they're adding microtransactions to it and it's not fun and people don't like it. At the end of the day, I don't want to sound like it's a winning and losing or whatever, but I know for a fact if anyone remembers my game, it'll be for the right reasons. If anyone remembers their game, it'll be for the wrong reasons. and I would rather be on that side of history. So that's definitely something there.
Yeah, and I think we've learned a lot today about ethical game development in certain ways and the ways that you apply your philosophy and your experiences to creating a game and the things you choose and things you avoid. And I really want to thank you for joining us for this breakdown. I really think there was a lot of like surprising insight in here into math and balancing and design and philosophy. So Dan, thank you very much for joining me. Charlie, thank you for coming in as kind of the expert. You played a lot more of this game than I have. And I hope you guys all learned something here, and I hope both of you had fun talking about this. Dan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.